There's a silent lie you've been taught since childhood, that showing everything, always being open, and exposing your vulnerabilities makes you more human, more accepted, stronger. But the truth is uncomfortable, because in practice, the more you indiscriminately display your weaknesses, the more you teach others exactly where to pressure you. Niccolo Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals, does not reward naivete. It exposes it. And perhaps you've already felt this. Have you noticed how some people seem to test you all the time, as if there were an invisible limit being pushed, little by little? It's not a coincidence. It's reading behavior. Decisions based on real human nature allow people to quickly identify who needs to be accepted and who doesn't. And here's the point that changes everything. Those who need it lose power. Now think about it and be honest. How many times have you over-explained yourself? Have you tried to justify a decision just to avoid judgment? Have you revealed insecurities to someone you didn't really know that well? It seems like connection, but often it's unnecessary exposure. The end justifies the means, and the means many use without realizing it is their own emotional openness. Better to be feared than loved starts to make sense when you understand that respect comes from clear boundaries, not indiscriminate vulnerability. Avoiding being hated still matters, of course, but avoiding being seen as someone easy to access, that completely changes the game. Because those who don't demonstrate a constant need for validation automatically reduce their attempts to test you. And here's something even deeper. It's not about completely shutting yourself off. It's about controlling access. Calculated use of force begins with this, with control over what you show and what you keep hidden. And that's exactly what you're going to understand now, not theoretically, but practically. Virtù and fortuna are not distant concepts. They are forces you already possess. You just haven't learned how to use them. Constant adaptability doesn't mean molding yourself out of fear, but positioning yourself intelligently. Your own loyal armies, in this context, represent your posture, your presence, your emotional control. Throughout this content, you will realize something that may never have been clearly stated. People only test you as long as they perceive they can. And the moment you stop showing signs of weakness, something changes. Their behavior changes. The way they see you changes. And most importantly, the way you see yourself changes. The question now is not whether this works, it's whether you're ready to stop playing the approval game and start playing the respect game. If something inside you awakened while listening, don't ignore that feeling. This channel isn't about videos, it's about memories. Remember who you were before the fear, before the exhaustion, before the silence. Each new video here is a different reflection of your own soul, an invitation to understand what the world never taught you. The power you seek outside has always been within you. If you feel that this journey speaks to what lives silently within you, sign up now, not to follow yet another creator, but to reconnect with something the world tried to make you forget. Because here, every word was made to heal, each reflection to awaken, and each video serves as a reminder. You are not alone on the path back to yourself. Click on subscribe and turn the algorithm into a daily reminder of who you really are. He learned early on, perhaps too early, that being accepted was synonymous with security. A smile validated, a compliment comforted, and a disapproving look. Well, that seemed almost like a sentence. Without realizing it, he molded his attitudes based on what others expected of him. And here begins the trap. When life is guided not by one's own essence, but by the constant need for approval, autonomy slowly dissolves. Niccolo Machiavelli already pointed out coldly and realistically that decisions based on real human nature require emotional detachment, something impossible for those who live seeking to please. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals, begins precisely here, understanding that social acceptance is volatile, unstable, and often manipulable. From childhood, we are conditioned to be good, polite, agreeable. But no one teaches us the cost of this, and the cost is high. The more you need to be accepted, the less authentic you can be. He begins to avoid conflicts, hide opinions, and even soften truths just to maintain an image of virtue. But ultimately, this creates a silent dependency, and dependency has never been synonymous with power. It's like an invisible game where, without realizing it, he surrenders his freedom in exchange for validation. And when someone discovers this, control changes hands. Now observe this in practice. A young person in the workplace who never says no, accepts all demands, and always tries to please the boss and colleagues. At first they seem admirable, but over time they become predictable. And predictability within a Machiavellian logic is vulnerability. The end justifies the means, and in this case, the means is to exploit those who don't set limits. They become overburdened, ignored in important decisions, and ironically, lose the respect they so desperately sought to earn. Better to be feared than loved doesn't mean being cruel. It means being respected enough not to be exploited. When someone realizes you depend on their approval, they automatically understand they can control your actions. This doesn't happen explicitly, but in the small details. Frequent interruptions, ignored decisions, devalued opinions. And the most curious thing, they continue trying to please, thinking the problem is a lack of effort. It isn't. The problem is their stance. Those who live to please give up the calculated use of force, that ability to say no, to assert themselves, to create clear boundaries. And without that, there is no balance in relationships. There is only submission disguised as kindness. And that's where an even deeper point comes in. The search for approval not only weakens externally, but also corrodes internally. One begins to doubt their own decisions, depending on the validation of others to feel secure, as if their internal compass has been switched off. Virtù and fortuna cease to be internal strengths and become dependent on the moods of others. They no longer act, they react. They no longer choose, they adapt. And yes, constant adaptability is a virtue, but not when it comes from insecurity. There is a brutal difference between adapting strategically and molding oneself out of fear of rejection. A leader, for example, can listen to their team, consider opinions, but still make firm decisions based on their own vision. Someone trapped in the need for approval hesitates, postpones, avoids confrontation. And in this silent game of human relationships, this is costly, because those who don't decide for themselves end up being decided by others. And without realizing it, they enter a cycle where their presence loses weight, their voice loses strength, and their image fades. This is where the question begins to emerge, albeit subtly. What if pleasing others isn't the safest path? What if there's another way to position oneself in the world? A less dependent, more strategic way, perhaps even a colder one. He begins to notice something uncomfortable, almost unsettling. The people he respects most are not necessarily the most agreeable. There is a firm presence about them, a kind of invisible boundary that no one dares to cross. And this reminds him of a direct, almost provocative principle that Niccolo Machiavelli made clear. It is better to be feared than loved. Now, calm down. We're not talking about fear in the sense of terror, but about profound respect, the kind that makes someone think twice before disrespecting you. Because love, when it doesn't come with limits, is fragile. It depends on moods, expectations, and above all, the convenience of others. Respect, on the other hand, that is sustained by the predictability of your stance, politics guided by reality, not by ideals, means understanding that affection can change from one day to the next, but respect built with firmness tends to remain. Those who live only seeking to be loved end up becoming hostages to the emotions of others. And this, in the real game of human relationships, is a dangerous position. Because when someone knows that you need to be liked, that person gains power over you. And see how this manifests itself in everyday life, without grand speeches, just in the details. Imagine someone who, in a professional environment, avoids confrontation at all costs. They prefer to give in, agree, let it go, all in the name of maintaining a pleasant atmosphere. Initially, they are seen as someone easy to deal with. But over time, their opinions begin to be ignored, their boundaries are crossed, they are treated as someone who will always accept things. The end justifies the means, and, in this scenario, the means used by others is simple: exploiting those who don't set boundaries. Now compare this to another person who speaks little, but when they do, they stand by what they say. Who doesn't raise their voice, but also doesn't back down. Who doesn't seek conflict, but doesn't run away from it when necessary. This person may not be the most loved in the group, but they will rarely be disrespected. This is calculated use of force, knowing exactly when to act, when to take a stand, when to interrupt a dynamic that disadvantages you. Avoiding being hated remains important, of course, but avoiding being disrespected, that is essential, because ultimately people don't test those who demonstrate clear boundaries. They test those who demonstrate insecurity. And here comes an even more subtle point, almost invisible to those who have never stopped to observe. Healthy fear is born from consistency. It's not about threatening, imposing, or intimidating directly. It's about making it clear through your actions that there are consequences for those who overstep their boundaries. Your own loyal armies, in a symbolic context, represent this: your posture, your consistency, your ability to uphold decisions even when they are unpopular. He begins to understand that being loved may bring comfort, but it also brings vulnerability. Because those who love you can abandon you, those who respect you think before acting against you. Virtù and fortuna come into play here, your inner strength. Virtù needs to be greater than the luck, fortuna, of depending on the approval of others. And this changes everything. He begins to realize that he doesn't need to be cold all the time, but he also can't be accessible all the time. There is a balance, a strategic dance between closeness and distance. And when he begins to adjust this, something changes. People begin to react differently, less invasive, more cautious, more respectful. And it is at this point that a new doubt begins to emerge, almost like a whisper. Isn't trying to please everyone precisely what makes someone lose value? He begins to notice an uncomfortable pattern. The more he tries to please, the less seriously he is taken. At first, this seems contradictory, almost unfair. After all, isn't kindness supposed to generate recognition? But reality, as Niccolo Machiavelli already pointed out, doesn't work based on beautiful ideals. It follows a cold logic based on real human behavior. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals, means accepting that when someone tries to please everyone, that person loses their identity. And without identity, there is no positioning. Without positioning, there is no respect. They become predictable, and predictability in this game is an exploitable weakness. Because whoever always says yes, whoever never confronts, whoever always conforms, ceases to be a reference and becomes a tool. An appearance of virtue may deceive for a while, but it doesn't sustain authority. And authority doesn't come from acceptance. It comes from the coherence between what one thinks, says, and does. When this coherence doesn't exist, people notice. Perhaps not consciously, but they notice, and they begin to test limits more and more. Now imagine someone who, in any group, tries to be liked by everyone. They laugh at jokes they don't find funny, agree with opinions they don't even believe in, avoid any kind of conflict as if it were a real threat. They seem light-hearted, friendly, a good person. But over time, something changes. People start to not take them so seriously. They interrupt their speeches, ignore their ideas, make decisions without consulting them. And they feel it, of course. But instead of adjusting their posture, they try to please even more, as if it were an equation of effort. But here, a silent principle comes into play. The end justifies the means. And the means that others use in this case is simple, using those who don't offer resistance. Better to be feared than loved isn't about pushing people away, but about preventing them from diminishing you. Because when someone realizes you need to be accepted, they automatically understand that they can overstep your boundaries without major consequences. This isn't malice, it's human nature. Decisions based on real human nature require you to see the game as it is, not as you would like it to be. And in this game, whoever tries to please everyone ends up belonging to no one. And the most interesting, almost ironic thing is that the more he tries to be liked, the further he distances himself from genuine respect. Because respect is born from boundaries, not submission. Virtù and fortuna come into play again. The inner strength to uphold who you are, virtù, needs to overcome the desire to be accepted, fortuna. Constant adaptability remains useful, of course, but it cannot be confused with a lack of assertiveness. There is a brutal difference between knowing how to adapt strategically and molding oneself out of fear of rejection. A simple example, someone who learns to say no calmly, without aggression, but firmly. Something like, "It doesn't make sense for me to take on this right now," without long justifications, without guilt, without unnecessary explanations. This type of posture gradually reprograms how others see you. Calculated use of force, not in intensity, but in precision. And it is at this point that he begins to perceive something even deeper. It's not just about how others treat him, but about how exposed he is. Because when someone shows too much, reveals too much, opens up too much, they may be giving away more than they should. And perhaps, without realizing it, they are providing ammunition to those who know exactly how to use it. He begins to realize something even more delicate. It's not just about pleasing or positioning oneself, it's about how much he exposes himself. There's a subtle but powerful difference between being authentic and being excessively vulnerable. And at this point, most people confuse everything. They talk too much, show too much, reveal insecurities to those who haven't shown they deserve that access. And here comes an uncomfortable truth. In the real game of human relationships, not everyone who listens to you is on your side. Niccolo Machiavelli already pointed out that decisions based on real human nature require caution, because when human beings see fragility, they often don't accept it. They test it. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals, means understanding that emotional exposure, without criteria, can become a tool in the hands of those who want to dominate you. It's not about closing yourself off completely, but about choosing precisely what to show, to whom to show it, and when to show it. Because once revealed, the information doesn't go back. And depending on who receives it, it becomes leverage. And this happens more often than people imagine. A co-worker who shares their insecurities with someone seemingly trustworthy, and weeks later realizes that it has begun to circulate in a distorted way. A friend who exposes their weaknesses in a moment of need, and in a future argument sees those exact words being used against them. The end justifies the means, and in this scenario, the means is to use the other person's vulnerability as an advantage. Sounds harsh? It is, but it's real. Better to be feared than loved. in this context, takes on a new meaning, not allowing your image to be associated with uncontrolled fragility. Avoiding being hated remains relevant, but avoiding being seen as someone easy to manipulate is essential, because those who demonstrate excessive neediness, a need for emotional validation or constant instability, are perceived as someone who can be pressured. And pressure in the human game is a powerful tool. It doesn't require shouting or confrontation. It just requires knowing where to strike. Calculated use of force here begins with something simple: self-control. Knowing how to control your emotions, breathe before reacting, and filter what you're going to say. It seems like a small thing, but it completely changes the dynamic. And then he begins to understand a silent principle, almost invisible to those who have not yet awakened. Power lies not in those who say everything, but in those who choose what not to say. Virtù and fortuna come into play once again, the inner strength to sustain one's emotions. Virtù must overcome the impulse to unload everything on the first available ear, fortuna. Constant adaptability is not about exposing oneself to connect, but about adjusting to the environment intelligently. Your own loyal armies, in this sense, represent your emotional control, that which protects you, which keeps you firm even when provoked, pressured, or when attempts are made to destabilize you. A practical example: instead of immediately responding to criticism or provocation, he learns to pause. Sometimes just an "I understand" changes everything, without justification, without explanation, without emotional surrender. This creates a rupture in the pattern that others expect, and when the pattern breaks, control changes. Because those who do not react impulsively cannot be easily manipulated. And it is at this point that something even more interesting begins to emerge: the power of not reacting. The power of simply not getting involved. The power of appearing indifferent. And perhaps, just perhaps, this calculated indifference is more powerful than any emotional response. He begins to test something new, something that at first seems counterintuitive. Instead of reacting to everything, he simply doesn't react. Someone provokes him. Silence. Someone tries to destabilize him. Neutral posture. And curiously, the effect is immediate, because people are used to predictable responses. Emotion for emotion, attack for defense. When that doesn't happen, the game breaks down. Niccolò Machiavelli already taught that true power lies in control, not in reaction. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals, demands that he understand that not every battle needs to be answered. In fact, most of them don't even deserve attention. The end justifies the means, and the most powerful means often is the absence of a response. Because when you don't react, you don't relinquish control. Better to be feared than loved here gains a new layer. Respect is born when others realize they can't easily access you emotionally. It's not gratuitous coldness, it's strategy. It's knowing that whoever controls their emotions controls the environment around them. And this is revealed in the small details of everyday life. A passive-aggressive comment at work, for example. Before he would explain, justify, try to correct the image. Now he just observes and moves on, without tension, without exaggerated expression, without defense. This type of behavior creates discomfort in those who expected a reaction, because whoever provokes wants a response, wants validation that they managed to get to you. When that doesn't happen, the dynamic changes. Calculated use of force appears here silently, not in action, but in strategic omission. Avoiding being hated remains relevant, of course. He doesn't become arrogant nor distant in a hostile way, but he also doesn't become available all the time. There is a subtle balance between presence and absence, and this balance generates something powerful: respect. Because whoever doesn't over-explain, whoever doesn't react impulsively, whoever doesn't get into every argument, transmits control. And control, in this invisible game, is synonymous with power. Decisions based on real human nature show that people test less those who don't show reactivity. They retreat, they observe, they calculate, and that completely changes how they position themselves in relation to him. And then he realizes something even deeper. Indifference, when well applied, creates value. Not because he becomes completely inaccessible, but because he begins to choose where to invest his energy. Virtù and Fortuna come into play again. His inner strength, Virtù, allows him not to depend on external reaction, Fortuna. Constant adaptability remains present, but now with intention. He knows when to take a stand, when to ignore, when to act. His own loyal armies, in this context, represent his emotional discipline, that which prevents any external stimulus from controlling his actions. A simple example: instead of immediately responding to a message that tries to pressure him, he waits. He responds in his own time, clearly, without emotional urgency. It seems small, but it completely alters perception. Because whoever doesn't show haste doesn't show need, and whoever doesn't show need cannot be easily manipulated. Little by little, he ceases to be someone who reacts to the environment and becomes someone who sets his own pace. And when that happens, something even more powerful begins to emerge: silence. Not empty silence, but strategic silence. The kind that speaks louder than any speech. He begins to understand that silence is not absence, it is controlled presence. Before, he felt the need to fill every space with words, to explain, justify, defend, argue. Now, he observes, he listens more, he speaks less, and he notices something almost disconcerting. The less he speaks, the more attention he receives. Niccolò Machiavelli already suggested indirectly that those who master the game do not reveal themselves completely. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals, demands economy of words, not an excess of them. Because every unnecessary explanation can be interpreted as insecurity. The end justifies the means, and in this case, the means is silence. Not a passive silence, but an active, strategic silence. Better to be feared than loved here gains an interesting nuance. Those who speak little and with precision come to be perceived as someone who doesn't need to prove anything. And this, in the collective imagination, generates immediate respect, because those who justify themselves too much seem to be asking permission to exist. And those who ask permission surrender power. And this becomes even more evident in everyday interactions. Imagine a situation where someone questions your decisions, expecting a long defense full of arguments. Instead, you respond with something simple. It was the best choice within the scenario. And you stop there. Without going into details, without trying to convince, without elaborating. The impact of this is immediate, because the other person finds no space to continue pressing. Calculated use of force here is not in the intensity of the response, but in its conciseness. Avoiding being hated remains important, of course. You don't respond with arrogance nor with contempt, but you also don't put yourself in the position of someone who needs to explain themselves all the time. Decisions based on real human nature show that the more you talk, the more material you give for interpretation, and often for distortion. Silence, on the other hand, limits access. And when access is limited, control is too. People begin to project, to imagine, to try to understand. And in this space of uncertainty, respect is born. And then he realizes something even more subtle. Silence creates magnetism. Virtù and Fortuna come into play again. His inner strength, Virtù, allows him to endure the discomfort of not responding immediately, while Fortuna ceases to depend on external validation. Constant adaptability remains, but now with intention and choice. He doesn't remain silent out of fear. He remains silent strategically. His own loyal armies in this context represent his discipline in not reacting impulsively, in not filling the void just to relieve tension. A practical example: in a conversation, he leaves pauses. He doesn't respond immediately. He maintains eye contact, but doesn't rush to speak. This creates a slight discomfort in the other person, and at the same time, a strong sense of presence. Because those who are not in a hurry transmit control, and those who transmit control are rarely disrespected. Little by little, he ceases to be someone who tries to convince and becomes someone who doesn't need to convince. And when the words diminish, something else begins to grow: the mystery. And perhaps it is precisely this mystery that defines who truly masters the game. He begins to realize that what is not revealed cannot be controlled, and this completely changes how he positions himself in the world. Before, he felt the need to explain his plans, share his thoughts, anticipate his intentions, as if total transparency were synonymous with trust. But over time, he understands that excessive exposure doesn't generate closeness. It generates predictability, and predictability within a strategic logic is a risk. Niccolo Machiavelli already pointed out that decisions based on real human nature require control of information. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals, means accepting that not everything should be said, not everything should be shown. The end justifies the means, and the means here is mystery. Better to be feared than loved gains a new layer. It's not the fear of what you do, but of what you can do, because when people can't predict your moves, they hesitate, and that hesitation is power. And this starts to appear in the simplest details. He stops announcing his next steps before executing them. Instead of saying, "I'm going to do this," he simply does it. Instead of sharing every decision, he shares only what is necessary, and often only after it has already happened. This creates a break in the pattern people were used to, because whoever reveals everything becomes easy to read, and whoever is easy to read is easy to anticipate. Calculated use of force here lies in the control of information. Avoiding being hated remains relevant, of course. He doesn't become coldly or arrogantly distant, but he also doesn't give away complete access. There is an invisible line, a boundary between what is public and what is strategic. Decisions based on real human nature show that people try to understand, label, predict. When they can't, they create respect, and sometimes even a certain apprehension, not out of irrational fear, but out of a lack of clarity. And a lack of clarity breeds caution, and caution limits attempts at control. And then he understands something even deeper. Mystery increases perceived value. Virtù and Fortuna come into play again. His inner strength, Virtù, allows him to feel no need to explain himself, while Fortuna ceases to depend on external validation. Constant adaptability remains, but now with strategy. He chooses what to show, when to show it, and to whom to show it. His own loyal armies in this context represent his discipline in keeping certain aspects of his life inaccessible. A practical example: instead of sharing every achievement or plan on social media or in conversations, he begins to act in silence and reveal only results. This completely changes the perception of those around him, because those who talk a lot about what they are going to do rarely impress, but those who show results generate impact. And impact in this game is worth more than any speech. Little by little, he ceases to be predictable and becomes enigmatic. And when that happens, something even more powerful begins to emerge, an internal transformation, because stopping explaining himself is only the beginning. The real turning point is yet to come. There comes a moment, and it doesn't happen dramatically, but silently, when he simply gets tired. Tired of measuring his words, adjusting his behavior, seeking approval in every glance. It's not an explosive break, it's an internal decision. A kind of clarity that arises when he finally sees the game as it really is. Machiavelli already indicated that the turning point happens when decisions cease to be guided by emotions and begin to be guided by reality. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals, begins to truly make sense now. He understands that he no longer needs to be accepted by everyone. He only needs to be respected by those who matter, and above all, by himself. The end justifies, the means ceases to be a distant phrase and becomes an applied principle. Stopping molding himself to please others is the necessary means to regain control. Better to be feared than loved ceases to seem radical and begins to sound logical, because depending on the love of others is unstable. But building a firm presence, that is consistent. And for the first time, he realizes that he doesn't need to prove anything. He only needs to uphold who he is. And this change begins to appear in practice, almost imperceptibly, to those who aren't paying attention. He starts saying no without guilt, without lengthy justifications, without discomfort. Something simple, direct. This doesn't make sense to me right now. Period. He doesn't go into explanations, doesn't try to convince, doesn't seek approval. The calculated use of force appears here with precision, not in intensity, but in firmness. Avoiding being hated remains relevant, of course. He doesn't become aggressive or hostile, but he also doesn't bend to avoid discomfort. Decisions based on real human nature show that when someone begins to position themselves clearly, the environment reacts. Some people distance themselves, those who benefited from his previous version. Others begin to respect those who recognize limits, and this initially can generate some discomfort, because he was used to being accepted, not to being questioned. But over time, he realizes something important. Those who stay out of respect, not convenience. And this completely changes the quality of relationships. And then something even deeper happens. His posture changes, not only in what he says, but in how he behaves. He walks differently, speaks differently, reacts differently. There's a calmness, an absence of urgency, a firmer presence. Virtù and Fortuna come into play again. His inner strength, Virtù, now sustains his choices, while Fortuna ceases to depend on external validation. Constant adaptability remains, but now with control. He adapts when it makes sense, not out of fear. His own loyal armies in this context represent his consistency, that which keeps his posture aligned regardless of the environment. A practical example, he enters a meeting and no longer feels the need to speak first. He observes, he analyzes. And when he speaks, he is direct, objective, without beating around the bush. This completely changes how he is perceived, because those who don't compete for attention attract attention. Little by little, he stops being someone who seeks space and becomes someone who naturally occupies space. And it is at this point that a new question arises. If stopping seeking acceptance transforms so much, what happens when this becomes a habit? When this becomes the norm? Perhaps the answer lies in how he starts acting from now on. Now he understands. It's not enough to understand the game. You have to play it. And here's something few truly apply: strategic simplicity. No complex theories or fancy speeches. Change happens through small actions repeated every day. Machiavelli already showed that decisions based on real human nature don't depend on intention. They depend on execution. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, means acting differently, even when it's uncomfortable. The end justifies the means becomes a constant reminder. Stop chasing after things, talk less, and act with intention. It's not coldness, it's positioning. Better to be feared than loved. Here translates to something practical, not being available all the time. Because excessive availability reduces value, and value in this game is perception. He begins to understand that respect isn't asked for, it's built, and it's built with consistent behavior. It's not about changing who he is, it's about stopping acting against himself, and that starts with simple but powerful decisions. First, he learns to slow down his responses, no more immediately replying to messages just to seem available. He reads, thinks, responds in his own time. This breaks an invisible pattern of emotional urgency. Calculated use of force begins right here, in controlling time. Second, he drastically reduces the need to explain himself. Instead of long justifications, he uses short, firm answers. It's not a priority right now. I'm not going down that road. No aggression, no excuses. Avoiding being hated remains important, of course, but avoiding being disrespected comes first. Third, he starts observing more than speaking. In meetings, conversations, or social settings, he listens. He analyzes. He only takes a stand when he truly has something to add. Decisions based on real human nature show that those who speak less are listened to more attentively. Fourth, he creates clear boundaries and upholds those boundaries without backing down. This may be uncomfortable at first, but it's essential, because those who back down once will be tested again. And finally, he stops sharing everything. Not every plan needs to be announced. Not every achievement needs to be displayed. At this point, mystery ceases to be a strategy and becomes the norm. Over time, these actions begin to generate a cumulative effect. Virtù and Fortuna come into play again. His inner strength, Virtù, grows as he sustains these attitudes, while Fortuna ceases to depend on external validation. Constant adaptability remains, but now with direction. He adapts when it's strategic, not when he's pressured. His own loyal armies in this context represent his discipline, that which maintains his firm stance, even when the environment tries to pull him back to the old pattern. A practical example? When someone tries to impose a last-minute demand, he doesn't react automatically. He assesses, responds calmly, and if necessary, refuses, without guilt, without tension. This, repeated over time, completely reprograms how others treat him, because people learn from the behavior you tolerate. And when you stop tolerating it, they adjust. Gradually, he ceases to be someone who adapts to the environment and becomes someone who influences the environment. And when that happens, something bigger begins to take shape. Not just a change in behavior, but a new way of seeing human relationships. And that vision was built long before he realized it. And then, finally, he sees what has always been there, the invisible game. Not the one that appears in words, but the one that happens between the lines, in the pauses, in the silences, in the restrained reactions. Niccolo Machiavelli didn't write about being good or bad. He wrote about being effective. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals, has never been about gratuitous coldness, but about lucidity, about understanding that human relationships are not guided solely by feelings, but by interests, perceptions, and power. The end justifies the means, when well interpreted, is not a license to do anything. It's an invitation to act strategically. Better to be feared than loved doesn't mean pushing people away, but ensuring that none of them overstep your boundaries without a second thought. Avoiding being hated remains essential because hatred breeds resistance. But respect breeds order. And order in the human game is what sustains any position of power. He realizes that he doesn't need to dominate others. He only needs not to be dominated, and that changes everything. Now, with this new perspective, he begins to see patterns that previously went unnoticed. People who subtly test limits, conversations that carry hidden intentions, situations where whoever talks the most reveals more than they should. Decisions based on real human nature cease to be theory and become daily practice. He understands that not every smile is genuine, not every criticism is negative, not every approach is disinterested. Calculated use of force becomes a constant principle, knowing when to act, when to retreat, when to ignore. His own loyal armies, in this context, represent his emotional and mental autonomy, that which prevents him from being influenced by any external pressure. A simple example, he begins to observe actions more than words. Because words can be adjusted, but behavior, when repeated, reveals patterns, and whoever understands patterns anticipates movements, and whoever anticipates movements is rarely surprised. This doesn't make him paranoid, it makes him conscious. And consciousness at this level is silent power, and in the end, he realizes that it's not all about manipulation. It's about not being manipulated. Virtue and Fortuna meet definitively here. His inner strength, Virtue, now guides his decisions, while Fortuna ceases to depend on chance or external approval. Constant adaptability remains an essential skill, but now with direction and purpose. He no longer molds himself to please. He adjusts to win. The appearance of virtue, when used intelligently, becomes a tool, not a prison. He can be cordial, polite, approachable, but never predictable, never uncontrollably vulnerable. And this creates something rare, presence, a presence that needs no effort to be noticed, nor words to be validated. Gradually, he ceases to be someone who participates in the game and becomes someone who understands the game. And whoever understands the game plays differently. But there is one last piece, perhaps the most important of all, that still needs to be fitted. Because understanding is one thing, applying is something completely different. Now let me ask you a direct question, one that can't be ignored. How long will you continue showing exactly where you can be hurt? Because deep down, you've already realized, haven't you? People don't test those who set boundaries. They test those who hesitate. They advance where they find space. And that space often is one you yourself created. Niccolo Machiavelli never spoke of being cold by chance. He spoke of lucidity. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals, demands that you stop romanticizing behaviors that weaken you. The end justifies the means, and the means now are simple. Stop exposing yourself indiscriminately. Stop justifying yourself all the time. Stop seeking validation where there is only self-interest. Better to be feared than loved isn't about pushing people away. It's about never again being underestimated. And avoiding being hated remains important, of course, but never again at the cost of your own respect. Now the responsibility is yours, because knowledge without action is a comfortable illusion. So tell me, in what situation in your life are you still over-explaining yourself? Where are you still trying to please when you should simply stand your ground? Where are you reacting emotionally when you could use silence? Calculated use of force begins with small decisions. The next time someone pressures you, will you react or will you pause? Decisions based on real human nature require courage. Not the courage to confront others, but to change your own pattern. Virtue and Fortuna are there, but only one of them depends on you. Constant adaptability isn't about reverting to old behavior, it's about sustaining the new. And your own loyal armies in the end are your habits, your discipline, your posture, because that's what will protect you, not your intentions. So now I want to hear from you. What impacted you the most here? In which part did you recognize yourself? And more importantly, what will you change starting today? write in the comments. Because sometimes putting it into words is the first step to breaking a pattern. And if this content brought you clarity, then you already know the next step. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because here you don't learn what's comfortable, you learn what works. And in the real game of life, that changes everything.